Sasha DeWitt, and this is the Studio Notes Podcast, the show where I chat with artists about the real-life stuff of being an artist. Hi, and welcome to Studio Notes with me, Sasha DeWitt, and today's guest, Katie Sollohub. On your website, you describe yourself as someone who documents and records the places you live and the people you meet. So I'd like to know, where did it all start? How did you begin your journey as a creative?
So let me think about that. It's one of those questions when people say, when did you start being an artist? And I think, well, I always was, always did. So I don't think I have an epiphany moment of that's when I started. But when I was a young child, I drew everything that fascinated me. So I did the horses thing, but also what I remember is drawing wildflowers. I'd pick wildflowers and draw flowers. So that was perhaps the beginning moment of me recording things of my everyday life. And yeah, that's quite a nice memory there, recording the things around me. And then as I grew older, I remember just loving still life, just drawing things that I could see in front of me. So I did do art at school. Did art through A-level. I was challenged at A-level. Really interesting teachers stretching me out of observation, getting us to run around and smash things up and all sorts of things. Really exciting A-level I did. And then I dropped out of art college. So there was something about the enormous freedom that art college could have given me or was giving me. I mean, in a way, it was 80s. I think it was too much freedom. There was no structure. Everyone was just down the pub. That's how I experienced it. And that wasn't for me. So in the end, I went back to anthropology. Did you want everything, by the way?
Yes, yeah, no, because this is really fascinating.
Story.
Absolutely.
I can shorten it. But I went to do psychology. So I went from art college to psychology to anthropology in the space of about a year or 18 months. And when I found anthropology, I thought, this is what I was looking for. So I think what my brain needed was something beyond the act of creativity. I've got to make something, or I've been set a project, or I've got to do a painting, because it didn't mean anything. And anthropology was like, I knew the world didn't have to think or everyone thought the same way. And here I am studying cultures where time is different, where the relationship to the land is different, where even the way people are named is different. Those are the significant things. Like if somebody doesn't even have a name, or their name is attached to what they do, that's a very different thing to our kind of identity of like, this is me. So I was fascinated by the way different cultures think and therefore different people think. And also to some extent that allowed me to think about the role of the artist. I did do an essay on shamanic. Can't remember the title, but it's about shamanism, the role of the artist in Western culture and shamanism in other cultures. So I had a kind of yearning for that deeper connection of like, well, what are we artists for? So when I finished my degree, I had one of those, that's probably is my epiphany moment, when I had to decide. I was unemployed for quite a long time, and I had a job offer in care work, which I knew I could do. I'd done some before, but my friends, I remember, said, don't do it, you'll never get out. So it was a job in care work, an MA in anthropology in London, or a part-time foundation in Worthing. And I chose the part-time foundation. And as soon as I did that, I knew there was no turning back. So that was me kind of finding the right time for me to do my art practice and dedicate my time to it. And I think by then I felt like a mature student, all of 24 probably. And I could focus on the project. or, focus on on personal development. I was more confident, but, focus on my own personal development and exploring my creative practice rather than pleasing the teacher, or what am I supposed to be doing? Now that I am a teacher, I can see it in other students when they come to a class and they're more worried about what I, the teacher, am thinking. And my job as the teacher is to get them to think, no, what is it you want to do? And I think at 18, I didn't have that confidence to find what is it that really fascinates me, regardless of what the teachers wanted. So yeah, that was my turning point. And then it was always still, in fact, yeah, it was at foundation, my tutors told me still life was boring. And so I thought, right, sod you, I'm going to do still life till it's done to death. So I spent a year and a half just doing objects and putting objects in boxes, putting objects on the wall, making sculptures of objects, drawing objects, painting objects, and absolutely loved it. Putting objects in matchboxes or making objects to fit in matchboxes. So it was always about the object in a space. And it seemed like quite a natural progression from there to go into the interior space of a room, because if you're drawing an object on the table, to me, it was always connected to the room. If we did life drawing, it was always connected to the room. Why are we drawing a naked person? It's always connected to the room. So I guess, again, that comes back to that anthropology. It's always connected to a bigger picture. So I would draw, I started drawing still life just around my house, objects, stories started coming into my work. And actually off the page altogether, by the time I was doing HND, which I did after my foundation, had little breaks in between, I was coming off the page altogether, onto the walls, into performance, and sometimes slightly obsessively recording things. I like dates of things. I like to do things in certain orders. And because I think once I start something, there's the thing that keeps me going is that momentum and that structure. Otherwise, it's too big and enormous. So if one of my constant little notes to myself will be something like, I want to paint everything, and it's just too big. So a room is a contained start for that. A matchbox is even better. Yeah, so that's how I began that process of documenting and recording. And I still think, although the statement that you read out was probably written quite a long time ago, and every time I think, oh, do I need to update it? But I think, no, it is, for me, it is about recording. It's recording my existence and my passage through life. So it might be still life, it might be interiors. And then I became known as, I paint or draw and paint in historic houses. And I kind of thought that might be it. That's my niche and that's what I will do. And it's really interesting to find that was really to do with the stories and the people and the connections that I made. And as I moved from place to place around that subject, the connections weren't as strong. And the whole project sort of faded out. And I questioned what was going on. And I think it was down to the people, which was interesting. The paintings and drawings had no people in them, but the connection, the project had to have people and warmth and communication and fascination and history and stories. Otherwise, it was just a commission and pleasing somebody else. So those faded out naturally. But that's still one of my loves, is if I go to a place, or I still have that urge. I want to paint everything. I want to record my own home. I want to write about objects. I want to hold things. If I go into a new space, I'm always looking at what's on the walls, what's around. I've thought about doing Zoom projects where I'm looking at the space around people in their Zoom boxes. That hasn't happened yet. So that is always there. And then much more recently, the human connection has possibly taken over or come out to the forefront through the Swimmers Project, which seemed like at first it seemed completely new and unexpected and not part of my practice. And why am I suddenly doing portraits of people? I'd avoided people. I did life drawing. I was a life model, and I just thought the whole process was pointless. I don't know why. I didn't see it. It was academic to me, not personal. And then here I am painting faces, painting portraits, painting potentially likenesses, or having that whole issue about, well, do people expect me to paint portraits of them that look like them? It began out of painting my daughter when she slept. So going back a bit to at least 5 years ago, painting her so she could get to sleep. So instead of reading her a story, or as well as reading her a story, I'd just paint her. Mummy, you're going to paint me. And it worked for a good 6 months or so. And then I think she just realized, annoyingly, I think it was because she knew I was posting the paintings on Facebook, and she then understood what it meant. And she didn't want me to do it anymore, which is completely fine. But I wish I hadn't done that, really. I wish I hadn't made her make that choice, because her photo wasn't on there, but the painting was. So obviously there's a personal connection, there's a diary element. So I think that's where I realized that it all comes from my life, from my domestic space, from whatever connection, whatever's going on in my life will come into my work. And having been out into the historic houses for quite a long time, suddenly I was back in the domestic space, but it's still all the same thing. It's just recording what's in front of me, recording my daily routines, recording rituals. And so from when she didn't want me to paint her anymore, I started painting myself. And that came after swimming. So again, the swimming was there was no intention to let's do a project about swimming. It was simply, this is what I do every day. And as I started to swim more and more into the winter, so it was probably at the time when I was first able to, again, with my daughter growing up, she could get to school by herself. I could join the group that swam at 8 o'clock every morning, and I'd look at myself when I got home. There's a mirror at the top of the stairs, and I think, blimey, you look different. You just come up the stairs and look in the mirror and think, wow, you look completely different. So I started painting myself, and I only did it a few times, maybe spread over a year. Through the winter I did it a few times, and it didn't become a bigger project until I'd started painting other people. So then the two went side by side. Currently now I've been painting myself after a daily swim for over 2 years, and the swimmers, the other swimmers that I painted, I did as again, just a natural spin-off from me painting myself. I think especially in the winter, I get a bit blue. And I remember asking one of the swimmers to come back for a cup of tea, and, oh, why don't I paint you? That was it. I'd missed a birthday of his. Why don't I paint you and give you a painting? And as we sat and had a cup of tea in my kitchen, I thought, wow, this is brilliant. This is turning my own personal private practice into a chance to interact, into something I'd never expected to be doing, painting portraits. So he was the first one, Phil, and I've since painted him about 4 times. And that was in my kitchen. Then I thought, this is brilliant. I'll invite some more people. I got microphones. I started videoing. Well, this is a great project. And people would come back, about 20 people You'd come back to my studio. It was upstairs at the time, so it was warm enough. You'd have a cup of tea and I'd paint them and have a conversation and video it. So again, recording. And then, just as I was thinking, what a brilliant project this will make, COVID came. Couldn't even meet outside, certainly couldn't meet inside. So, but also at the same time, everybody started outdoor swimming. It was like ballooning and phenomenon. So I just thought, I've got to do this. I have to do it. I have to find a way. So I spent whatever time of lockdown pondering and then thinking, and then eventually writing a funding application, which meant by spring of 2021. So having started in the winter of 1920, not 1920, but 2019, 2020. Yeah, 100 years ago. So I did, 2021. I got the application in and got the funding to start in February, March 2021. And I'd really wanted it to be a winter project. And thankfully that spring, it was bloody cold all the way through. I think my first portrait was at the end of February. It was really cold through March and April. So I got a bulk of the people. I did 3 or 4 or 5 people a week. And it was just amazing. And it was about, I thought how odd that somebody who in some way I'm late for everything. I don't like diary appointments. I find it difficult to manage, and I don't paint portraits, and in my head I'm not very sociable, but actually the fact is that's my job. I teach and I communicate, and I can keep a diary and I can keep appointments if it's work. So it was really fascinating. I turned it into work. This is serious. I'm being paid because I've got the funding. And yeah, it was extraordinary to turn it into something. And it became bigger and bigger and bigger because I would record the conversations with people. And so, and again, it's anthropology. I'm doing a study of people and why they swim and who they are and how we're connected and how we're different. So it was, really, really fascinating. And I did that through most of 2021. And now I'm back to just painting myself. And I have all of this data and documentation from the Immersed project. That was me talking to other people and swimming with them. That I have all this data and documentation that I think there's still more in there, or there's more project that I could do, choosing particular people or places to swim. I could travel and meet people through that project. So there was it's bigger than I imagined. And there was something I was going to say about that I can't remember. Yes, because of COVID, we couldn't meet indoors, which meant that we had to meet on the beach. And I thought, this isn't going to work. This is not going to work. It's going to be too cold. But actually that made the whole project. So we would swim together, dress, sit together. I would paint and we'd be recorded, filmed and audio, and I would paint. And the whole thing about a lot of what I'm recognizing in my work, going back to timekeeping and scheduling, is that I really enjoy the urgency of painting under pressure. So left to my own devices, my head can get in the way and think, what's the point of all of this? But if you're sitting on the beach, freezing cold, somebody has offered their time and spirit to join you in this project, and you're sitting there feeling sorry for yourself as an artist, it's not good. So I had to be really, I mean, I would share those insecurities as well, but I also had to be really just committed. You know, I never stopped. I never threw any away. I never gave up. Some of them were really quick, and but about halfway through the project, I realized it was better for me also to do one where I was seriously studying their face and being quite self-critical and worrying about, well, what will they think? And then I'd put that one down and then get another piece of paper and do a really quick one, which was always for me better. And the other thing I learned was I didn't show them the painting. So at the end of the portrait, they would hold their painting in front of them like this, but face out, so that I was photographing them holding their portrait, but they didn't get to see it. And that again was really, really vital. So there was a lot about the process of creativity, but process of vulnerability. Both of us sharing, people shared so many stories in that situation. And you can see actually by the way I'm going on about it, it was a really, really important project. And I would say since then, I kind of don't know how to follow it up. I don't know how to follow up the magic of that or something equally good. So at the moment, I'm in kind of limbo land, just with my own plodding daily accumulation of daily portraits. But it's not quite as exciting. I don't have that conversation with myself in the mirror.
I was wondering, because it's such an interesting process, because that grew out of something that was sort of organically your own. So you were doing portraits of yourself, and then it just grew out of that. It wasn't as if you sat around thinking, how can I do this?
And that is probably the only or best way that my work comes, which is great when you're flowing, because the organic flow, you know, things just connect and grow. But I'm not so good at thinking, okay, well, I did that, so now, you know, I'll apply for funding and do this, or I'll take the same project and take it to another city or, you know, seaside town, which is perfectly feasible. But I don't really want to do it like that. So once I've done it, I'm waiting for the next organic thing to grow out of it, with all sorts of other interruptions and distractions that make it harder for that to flourish, I would say. So it's brilliant when it works and things grow organically.
But I find this whole journey that you've spoken about, I mean, there's so much really juicy, good stuff. Starting with you not, you know, going to art school and feeling that real disconnect between what you were doing and something deeper, maybe more meaningful, and then doing the anthropology. And even for me, you just saying that has really set off so many like light bulbs, and things are firing in my brain, because I think it's something that I struggle with. You know, when I'm making artwork, I often am questioning, why am I doing this? There has to be something more than me just painting an animal or just so this connection that you've made for me, like, I'm going to go away from this and start to explore a little bit more about some depth, and I love anthropology as well. So like even looking at that, and or looking at other ways to find that are outside of the artistic system, I suppose.
Definitely.
So really fascinating. And then you also spoke about, so that you were doing the anthropology, then you moved into sort of going back to the still life, which I loved that you, because a lot of times in art school people say stuff and it really gets under your skin, and then it sort of is like a canker sore, and it's there and it's festering, and then you go and you think, no, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do it to death, you know, I'm just gonna do it and do it and do it, and finding meaning in that, and how all of the things that you're doing are sort of tying back to this, looking at things anthropologically, and looking at, you know, what it is and where it comes from and who, and the stories that are behind it. And then moving into as well, I love that you spoke about, you said, I'm not a sociable person, but I am through my art. And I think this is also something that I've been finding. this idea of, like if I have to go to a party, that absolutely is a
Mhm.
horrible idea. Don't love socializing like that. But I love speaking to artists, and I love speaking to artists about artwork, and
Yeah.
I love speaking to people who don't have anything to do with art but see my
Yeah.
artwork. And then that also
Yeah.
opens up a lot of dialogue.
Yeah.
So I think you as well, what you were speaking about yourself becoming more sociable, but within a sort of art, um,
Yes.
through
Yeah.
your art, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's through a real connection. If you, I don't know whether it's even necessarily has to be art
Mm.
art, but through the, yeah, like I was saying, through the historic houses, it was the people who really got my work who were the connection, rather than it just being sort of decoration. Um, and because I meet lots of people in my art teaching who I would say I don't have that connection with, because they want something that I'm not
Mm.
willing to offer them, or that I don't have to offer them. So it's more, I think it's whoever it is, when you connect on a deeper level. And it can be, so through the swimming, I met lots of swimmers, and through that sitting down, I think it just gave us each a almost sacred space. It's a bit like confessional,
Mm.
it's like, or therapy. Here I am, here we are, just together. It's just us, nobody else is listening. I am recording it, but it's just us. And we will share. It's like you asking me questions now, and as you can tell, I really like talking about, I like the yeah, I like all the connections through my own work that only come out when I'm talking. And then you say something, and I'll be like, oh yeah, and I say something, and you're like, oh yeah. So when you have those kind of conversations, I don't think it has to be art, but it
Mm.
has to be something on a deeper level that's meaningful, rather than party talk, or what
Mm.
do you do. And I even hate the question as an artist, so what do you do? And I just, at the moment, I just currently say, oh, I'm not doing anything. And to some extent that's true, but then I realize it's not true. But it's also not, I've got an exhibition, or I'm
Mm.
working on a series of, I work in oils, I do lino cuts or whatever. It doesn't matter what I do. And I hate that question.
But it is something that I find fascinating about your work, because I have followed you for a lot of years, both on Instagram and just in life. Um, yeah, that
Stalking.
you just do what you're doing, and I kind of like that. I think that's really
Yeah.
important. I think it's important because I think we often feel like we have to have maybe this is how society makes us feel. We have to have a project, we have to have an end goal, we need to know where we're going, but it's okay. And I think it's really crucial as an artist to be able to say, actually, right now, I don't know where I'm going, I
Yeah.
don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And anything that comes my way is good.
Yeah.
It keeps you quite open to possibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. But it can also be quite, it's quite precarious and quite scary.
Mm.
So it's great when that organic thing grows, and you think, oh, this is easy, because all I was doing was portraits of my daughter, then it was portraits of me, and then it was portrait of Phil, and now it's a big project that I've been funded for, and then it's an exhibition on Worthing Seafront, and all of that happened. I can look back retrospectively, and I know it wasn't smooth sailing all the way through, and I know there were times when I couldn't cope, or didn't know what was coming next. But I look back and think, yeah, that was a really solid project. Being in the space in between projects, when you haven't got that schedule and timetable, being self-employed, um, I teach for my money, so I have to figure that out. I'm a single parent, and it's like there's a lot of stuff going on that you you have to, sometimes there just isn't space for that organic growth to happen. And I just have to trust. That's the main thing, is trust, and make space, stop this is very pertinent at the moment, because I've just realized was trying to cut down teaching. COVID helped cut down teaching, and then I've not even put that much back in teaching wise. So what have I filled my time with? What am I still doing that is stopping me having days in my studio? And I look at my diary and I think, oh, that's because I've added something there on a weekly basis, added something there on a weekly basis, added something there. So I do a lot of, it's almost like sort of, things like therapy. I put that in my diary, which is great, but that will take up a day, because wherever it is in the day, you kind of think, oh, well, I've got therapy coming up, or I've got this. I do my online teaching. I do dance online. And I've just looked at my diary and I thought, all I've done is I've replaced my overdose of teaching, overload of teaching, with stuff that I thought was good for me. And I really need to start taking some load off of myself, because right now I haven't got that space for that next organic thing, which, as you say, when I like to, I think what am I getting to? If my art practice has to come out of where I'm at, then what I'm thinking is, could I make anything come out of this predicament I find myself in? Could I make something that is about time and time management? Could I make something that is about the washing up? Can I make something that's about my negative thinking? What can I do? But it has to grow out of it, rather than me sitting there thinking, what's my next project? But there's definitely something around, okay, so if my work is about wherever I am, and if I've pushed myself into a corner where I feel stuck, then what might be that trigger to get out of that corner? And like you say, anthropology, you suddenly think of a different thing. I mean, currently my practice is probably being, my personal routines and practice is being dominated by meditation, which is brilliant, and it's changing how I'm teaching, certainly, and in theory I want to use it to get into my studio so that I meditate and feel into that space, but I don't make time for it. So it's like the key I think is there. I've even got it in my hand. So I think I'm trying a bit too hard to do that. And there's probably going to be something like ski jumping, or, something completely unexpected. I'm not going to do ski jumping, but it'll probably be something completely unexpected that's not the earnest, good, hardworking, meditating artist. And it's going to be something else that I stumble across under the bed or whatever. It's going to be about my tidying up.
I love that. I also love it because I think you started the meditation stuff last year, or at least online you did. I think January, it was last year around January, right?
Yeah.
And how did that start? I mean, did that grow out of, because I feel like at the time you were saying, I feel like you had said something about like you maybe lost your way with being in the studio regularly, perhaps, and that this was an idea to get you back in the studio, get you in that space that you need to be in mentally. Can you talk a little bit about that, maybe?
I can talk about that, but you might be maybe not surprised, but you might be disappointed to find that it didn't work for me. It worked for the first couple of sessions and I thought, this is brilliant. But what I've done is I've created a job. So I'm sticking with it because I find it really fascinating and really valuable, and it is affecting my practice. So basically the idea was, I have an hour where I lead a meditation through into drawing, and we're all sitting in our studio spaces in the morning, and we all stay there if we can in our studio spaces with a commitment and a kind of sense of like, yeah, we're all in this together. And for the first few sessions I thought, yeah, this is great. But then I realized I've got to register. I started taking money, so that meant I had to tick off the money. I also I do like it, and I like writing down what I've done. So it is a recording process, and I write down everything afterwards straight away, which then I want to share. Being a teacher in me, I want to share that. So then I have to email people. I've got the recording, which I have to download, trim it, and send a link out. I look up poetry and I research things. So the researching bit and the writing what I've done, I really like. It's kind of enriching, and I feel like I've got a catalogue now. I've got a year's worth of 1 hour meditations with a synopsis or a written description of what we did, and poems and references and artists. So I feel like it's a really good job. And actually, now I've moved. I was trying a Saturday course for those who couldn't come in the morning. I've moved them both to Tuesday. So I bookend my Tuesdays with these 2 meditation hours. And I've just got an assistant who's going to help me doing the paperwork. So all I have to do is run the session and write up my notes. And I like that bit. So I'm hoping come January that my Tuesdays will be back, or Tuesdays can stay as a teaching day, and I need to make another day space. I need to free up space. So, and I think I need it to be routine. And so I'm hoping that I do feel still, even though it didn't work entirely, I just created a job for myself to do. But I still feel like that it's so important what I'm doing there, and the feedback I get from it. And it's touching on a lot of my own, basically, I think what I'm giving is my own experience. So therefore it touches people. And I love picking themes, and I love the fact that it's just for the day. It's just for that hour. This is all we're doing. So we've been drawing a candle. Last week we drew a candle flame. Nobody looks at each other's work. Nobody shows their work. Nobody's asking me what materials to use. Nobody's talking. We're all in this space together, but we're quiet. And I find it just a fascinating way of teaching. Where you're not teaching, you're facilitating, you're providing the space, you're just it's sort of trust, and this is enough, and no preconceptions, no expectations. And wouldn't that be great to have that in your practice by yourself? And that's what I think that's why I'm in limbo, because it's like, well, if that's it, if it's as simple as that, so let's say I was in my studio drawing a candle. I don't know, it's like, well, then what? There's always that question, then what, which in a teaching situation would always be there with students, and I think it's always there in my work. So there's something about kind of, could your work be doing nothing? Could being an artist be doing nothing? And I know that seems utterly ridiculous, but
I don't think it is. I mean, I was writing to myself, but I was basically writing under something that I call the art of doing nothing.
Yeah.
Which is a concept that I have, because I think, I think that you have to do nothing.
Yeah.
A lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And something comes out of that. But when I'm doing it and in the middle of it, I can't explain what it is.
Yeah.
It's very vague, very abstract. It is a lot of nothing that becomes something.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not the thought process, because it just made me think of Marina Abramovich. And she sits and does nothing, but it's very powerful. It's not nothing at all. So she'll sit with people in those 3 minutes of silence. And that is, her practice is incredible. strength in that apparent nothingness. So it's stripping back the expectations of what art is, and it's quite hard to do that, I find, on my own, as on your own. So I think what I've done is I've created the intention of doing nothing, but I can't quite cope with it, so I've filled it with other things, research, investigation, therapy, all this kind of stuff. And actually doing nothing in my studio could just, I think my studio still fills me with expectation. So I have been yearning recently, and in fact I bought a sheepskin rug, which my daughter didn't like the smell of, so I put it in my studio. And my studio is one of the places where I do lie down a lot and do nothing. And so I'm thinking that that's where I need to go back to, is just take my rug and snuggle up and do nothing. And whether I can do nothing without even reading a book, without even writing, without even drawing, that it is quite scary. It is quite scary. Yeah, so yeah, perhaps there could be a project, maybe you could, like we could commit to, let's go to our studios and do nothing. Do artists need support? I've been thinking about the support, the communication, and the audience, and whether the audience can be me. Is that enough of an audience? So if I filmed myself doing nothing, would I feel more valid than if I was just doing nothing? Yeah.
And it is an interesting question, because I say napping is a really important part of my practice.
Yes.
Hugely important. There is a point where I love to, especially once my brain's become overloaded, I love to just lie down and just close my eyes, and then all this stuff is going on, but I don't have to do anything with it. It's just there. And I find it really beautiful. I'm the only person who's experiencing this. To everyone else, it looks like, why are you sleeping on your sofa in your studio? Like, what's going on? But it's such an important part of my practice. But you're right.
Amazing. I've not found that in lying down.
But I think it goes back to, but I also think, procrastinating, am I being lazy? As a single parent, as somebody who supports themselves, I'm constantly thinking, well, I'm not earning any money from napping, but I am recognizing that it's an important part of my process. Absolutely. So I'm never like apologetic for it. I'm like, guys, this has to happen. This is how I am. But it is that interesting, like you say, once you start to, if you film it, then that almost changes it as well. It's no longer nothing in some ways, because you're recording it. So
and what I've realized in just by talking about it, and in my current state of mind, I don't know, Christmas, winter, short days, etc., that I do more napping when I am more productive, or when I'm more engaged with my practice. It's not even productive. When I'm more engaged with my practice, I get that overwhelming urge to nap, and I'll be in my studio and I feel absolutely fine. It's the one place where I do nothing. Whereas in my house, I can't do nothing. I might sit down and watch telly with my daughter, but it's not very often. And I might go to bed early, but that's not very often. The only place I really relax is in the bath in my house. So it's almost like my creative practice, my studio practice, is telling me to come in, lie down and do nothing, because you're safe in here. And I don't know whether it's old habits, or I'm avoiding all of that by making myself feel busy. And I do think there's a sort of lurking memory of times when I was depressed, or times when, when I had to fill my space. I had to make myself do something because doing nothing was unbearable. So I think it's a fine line. It's like the joy of doing nothing is sometimes lost because I don't give it space. And it is my art practice that will give it space, and I'm not giving that. I'm not getting into that. So it's all part and parcel. And this is such good timing because I've just been in a real sort of like, yeah, and just thinking, what am I doing? And the conclusion is just start dropping things, start putting things down, and do more nothing. Yeah.
And I love as well you speaking about what you're doing in your studio versus what you do at home as well, because I think creatives, you're never not creative, or it's not as if you can turn that part of yourself off.
Yeah.
And I often think about how people use their studio space, and I love how you're speaking about your studio space as this very safe place for you. And I'm finding that really interesting, because I think before I got a studio space, I was a little bit worried that it might be sterile, or like you just go in and oh gosh, it suddenly feels like a lot of pressure. I'm in here, I've got a studio space, I need to be making stuff, I need to make it worthwhile. But how my relationship with my studio space has changed as well has been really interesting over I've only had one for a year, but watching that relationship with the space change. And hearing you speak about your space is really interesting.
It's really important. I haven't had a shared space or like a communal, a place where you go for years now. And sometimes I do think that, when it's in your garden, it's too close to home and I don't have to go there. But studio spaces, that's a massive subject, isn't it? Because where is it? Is it big enough? It's never big enough. How often do you use it? I'm never in there enough,
Maybe that'll be like my next season. I'll interview people about their studio spaces and how they're using them, because I do think it's a huge topic. And for me, and even for people who maybe are doing art from home at the moment and are considering getting a studio space, it's a great exploration for them as well.
And just which space you've got at home, and do you have a permanent space at home? Do you have to clear the kitchen table and get your stuff out? I think there's a book called Artists in Their Studio.
Oh yes,
when it photographs them, and there are really, really brilliant questions like where do you keep your paints and brushes? And there's people saying, oh well, I had this specially made, and they've got this table on wheels with a drawer under there and brushes there. And it's the questions that artists want to know. It's like, what's your system?
Then it's like, so you see, oh, I had this custom made, or then it's stuff like, oh, I use these great pickle jars because they have really wide necks. Like for me, it's all about the peanut butter jars and the pickle jars, and I go to stores buying food with that in mind a lot of the time.
It would be brilliant.
So we're at the end of our time, so that's really wonderful. Thank you so much for interviewing with me today. Before we go, I know you do a few courses. You do the meditation online, and you're going to continue that. And what other teaching are you doing at the moment?
I teach a lot with Emily Ball at Sea Whites, and currently I've just had amazing 2 days doing embodied drawing, getting people to work in kind of 4 meters on the floor, 4 meters up the wall of space. So a really huge space for drawing. That was amazing. And a follow on from there is going back to my original start of this conversation, how a still life is always connected with the space of the room. So I'm inventing a course called Making Room for Drawing, where people are going to be given a wooden structure, a space upon which they can attach paper, board, card, canvas, stretch onto the wall, put objects inside, light it, draw it, perform it, be in it, film it, dismantle it. That's coming up in February, Making Room for Drawing. And Sea Whites is a great studio because it's massive, and and you can do huge projects. So I'm also doing one where we're going to visit Chichester Cathedral drawing and then come back and make as big as we can drawings about the cathedral space. That's in March. Do figure painting the figure with fabrics there as well. And a couple in Brighton at the Atelier.
Okay.
Atelier by the Sea. I think that's going to be later in the year, sketchbooking and meditation and mark making, one-day workshops. Can't remember the third one. Oh, large gestural drawing. I love working big. I love
that. I love seeing that about your work, because one of my things this year was to go bigger, and I've been looking at your work and how you just you're big anyway. So it's really nice to see that. And it gives me courage to be, yes, I can go much bigger than I've ever thought.
Yes, yeah. And I'm currently thinking maybe the way around my current inertia is that I take a leaf out of the embodied drawing and just cover my studio with paper, canvas, whatever, cardboard, and just, instead of it being a thing, I just go in there and I draw on the walls. Or maybe I just draw on the walls without covering it. But, I think I just need to turn it into an environment and not a thing. And not for any purpose, just a record of every day I go in there and this is what happens.
Yeah. And it becomes a record of just you doing that. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think I've used that process before, but not for a long time. So
it's nice. I think if it's something you've done before and you haven't visited in a while, and then you come back to it, it's always nice to see, well, where is it now when I revisit?
Yeah.
What I'll do is I'll include links to all of these things down in the below the podcast. So I'll include those. I'm really interested in the February one personally. I might attend. I'm like trying to budget for it at the moment because it looks amazing.
There's also going to be drawing, meditation and walking in the summer. That's going to be a residential at Downs with Emily, co-teaching with her. And the other place you could mention is Westdean College.
Westdean, okay.
Yeah, because I do various things there. I can't remember what's coming up next. I don't do so much there.
Is there one place on your website where you have your courses listed, or not?
Well, interestingly, in COVID, I thought, that's it, I'm not teaching anymore. So I took out, I did a new website and made it all about my work. And so now you have to go to the about page, and there's a sort of stuck on PDF, which has got some dates, but it's all out of date now. Yeah. Basically, I mean, the drawing and meditation should be on there. The links for that are on there. And you might find the old links to Westdean, Emily Ball and Atelier by the Sea, and occasionally Hampshire Art Studios. So yeah, there'll be stuff from the old stuff, and one-off workshops I haven't yet recovered, but I might be doing some more of those myself. Okay. Nothing planned yet. Yeah.
All right. Well, it sounds really fascinating. I want to thank you so much
for pleasure.
Interviewing today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Studio Notes with me, Sasha DeWitt, and guest Katie Sollohub. I love the way that she makes connections and allows for organic growth in her practice. To find out more about her work and her courses, you can click the links below. If you like this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe, as it really helps others to find us. And of course, thank you so much for listening to Studio Notes with me, Sasha DeWitt. Big shout out to the Arts Council, who have given funding for this podcast as part of my DYCP grant. So thank you.